I can never tell for sure when this thing is working or not, but I'm going to assume it is. Welcome to God Talks. This is my live stream where I talk about the Bible and about walking by the Spirit. Excuse me. Christian living and that sort of thing. And answer questions if I can. So, I appreciate you coming. And today, I have a special video for you that I want you to watch with me. It's interesting how people who don't want to believe in the Bible and in God will make statements about it that are completely unsupported by the facts, but they'll make them anyway because they just want to denigrate God and denigrate the Bible. And so there have been a lot of interesting discoveries in the last century that have revealed archaeological evidence of the existence of many of the things that they claim never occurred. For example, the existence of David, the king of Israel. Excuse me. The existence of Joseph in Egypt. Many, many other things where archaeological proof has shown that the Bible is historically correct in what it relates. There's also, thank you very much. Was it Hossie F2U? Thank you. There's also been a lot of evidence uncovered that shows that there is support for what's in the Bible in what they call pagan literature. Pagan being non-religious. Excuse me for my cough. I have a lung problem and I'm still working with the doctors to try and get this sorted out. The video that I'm going to show you today is a man who is a retired cold case detective. And he has a very interesting approach to the Bible. He approaches the Bible like it's a case, and he looks for evidence or clues that support it. And so, in this particular episode of his, he actually calls his channel Cold Case Christianity, which I think is very fascinating. So anyway, let's see. I want to talk to God, but I'm afraid because we haven't spoken. Oh, goodness. This is some dude who pogues. Okay. Let me explain to you. God has been with you and beside you throughout your life, waiting for you to talk to him, hoping that you will. So you don't need to be afraid to talk to him. Even if it's been a long time, all you need to do is say, God, I'm ready to talk, and then start talking. There's nothing to be afraid of. God is a God of love, and he's already forgiven you for all your sins, and so there's nothing to be afraid of. You have nothing to worry about. Just go ahead and talk to him, and he will talk to you. Okay? So this gentleman calls his channel Cold Case Christianity. And in this episode of his channel, he's talking about profane or pagan literature, things outside of the Bible that actually show that what's in the Bible is accurate. And so, how can I read the Bible in a year? Excuse me. The easiest way that I know, some dude, is just download a Bible app. Almost all of them have a program that allows you to read the entire Bible in 1 year. The one I use is called Dwell Bible, but it's not the only one. There's others. Pick one that you like that fits your lifestyle, and then just start in Genesis 1:1, and excuse me, they have lots of different programs where you can do the New Testament, you can do the Old Testament, you can do the whole Bible, and you can schedule it over a year or 6 months, whatever you want to do. So it's entirely up to you. You just decide which one you want to do. So, excuse me, this gentleman is going to be talking about how he approaches profane literature to see if it supports what's in the Bible. And I think you're going to be pleasantly surprised and fascinated by what he has to share. So, this is Cold Case Christianity, and the title of this particular episode is Non-Christian Sources That Accidentally Prove the Bible.
Okay, now we're going to continue assessing the reliability of the eyewitness claims of the Gospels by applying that template we started with. The 4 aspects of eyewitness reliability that are derived from the 13 jury instructions that most juries are offered around the country. The questions that we can ask of eyewitnesses, kind of as we think about these eyewitnesses and how they testify. And we're going to be assessing their reliability based on these 4 broad categories. We've already talked about, were they present to actually see what they say they saw? And for us, looking at the Gospels, that means, were they written early enough to have been written by eyewitnesses? Now, let's go to the second aspect of eyewitness reliability. And that is this issue of whether or not they can be corroborated or verified in some way. Remember, these are the 4 broad categories. We've discussed the first one. Now we're going to go to the second. Can they be verified in some way? Now, this is important because corroboration is often required to know if somebody is telling you the truth, especially if you have 2 competing witnesses who say 2 different things. And in criminal trials, we're typically talking about things like this, like a DNA corroboration, or if somebody says that they saw someone jump a counter, and well, their palm print should be where they said they placed their hand, right? So we're looking at fingerprints and material evidences. This is the kind of stuff that we're looking at when the crime is only 30 years old and we have some forensic evidence. But what do you do if the claim is thousands of years old? Well, we're still going to be looking at a corroboration in one way or another based on what it is they tell us. And one of the external ways we can corroborate a claim, especially a claim of antiquity, is simply, for example, to look at the archaeological evidence, right? They're making claims, for example, about, the Gospels make claims about what happened in a particular region of the Roman Empire in a particular century. Well, then we should have some claims about the geography or the characters or the structure of government or just the cities that are mentioned. And if you were to look at the claims of, say, for example, the Book of Mormon and compare them to the claims of the New Testament, you would find a stark contrast. That 1,000-year history in the Book of Mormon between, say, 600 BC and 400 AD, you won't find any archaeological support for any of those claims. Any of the people groups that were said to be there, a single name from the Book of Mormon ever mentioned by any historical character, allegedly. You will not find any support for a city, any support for coin systems. Well, a lot of folks, thought the same thing of the New Testament. There was skepticism in the 17th, 18th, 19th century about whether or not Luke, for example, was recording anything accurately in the book of Acts. So I want to show you a list, just a brief survey of some of the some of the claims, rather, of the New Testament made by either John or Luke. Most of them here are made by Luke, a couple here by John. But I want you to see, these are claims that people doubted as written by the authors of the New Testament. Now, ultimately, archaeology has confirmed these claims. So where we had skepticism, we ultimately now have confirmation. And you will see this over and over again in the claims made by New Testament authors that were originally doubted, but later confirmed. Now, I'm constantly updating my list, and I have this written at our website at coldcasechristianity.com. But also, the 10th anniversary edition of Cold Case will includes, for example, a number of new archaeological finds that continue to verify the claims of the New Testament. By the way, if there was a Mormon scholar who could point to these kinds of verifications for the Book of Mormon, they certainly would. There just isn't anything, because those you should expect something. By the way, I don't expect every detail of the New Testament to be confirmed by archaeology. This is a discipline of fractions. But I would expect some confirmation. So I don't expect there to be every detail of the Book of Mormon to be confirmed, for example, but there should be some confirmation. And the fact that there is none should tell us something. So what else beyond the external confirmation of, say, archaeology could we point to verify or corroborate claims in the New Testament? Well, there are some internal corroboration, some internal evidences we could look at. And one of the things I often talk about is the unintentional eyewitness support that any two witnesses might give to support each other in a case. In other words, I often will have an interview where I'll interview one witness, and that person will tell me something that's confusing. And I'll take notes. I will write down what they said, but they'll leave out some detail. For whatever reason, they'll make a claim that doesn't seem to make any sense. So let me give you an example of this. We talked to one witness after a robbery, a bank robbery, and this witness says something like this. The suspect just walked up to the teller, and he just stood there in front of the teller. And it was weird because he just stood there. Didn't hear him say anything. And I'm not sure why, but she just looked like she was scared to death. And it seemed like almost for no reason at all, she just started giving him money. That seems odd, right? So this witness comes in, and based on what this witness is telling us, I have an open question. The question I would have is, okay, so why would she just start giving him this money? Like what would cause her to be so afraid that she would just give him money? Well, if you keep on interviewing eyewitnesses, this eyewitness may have been standing behind the suspect in line. There's another eyewitness standing to the side. And that eyewitness, when interviewed, gives us a detail that's interesting. This eyewitness says, yeah, he came up to the counter. This is like a coworker, right? She's standing there next to the teller, and that she sees that this guy's going to walk up, and it turns out he handed her a note. And this witness says, yeah, I could see there was some kind of a bulge under his jacket that seemed like the tip was pointing to her. Oh, so what's happening here is he's given her a demand note, and he's pointing what appears to be a gun or a weapon of some sort that they can't see that's under. Maybe he even says something in the demand note. Now this makes sense. I can insert this piece of information from the secondary witness, who, although they may not even know what the first witness said, they provide a piece of information that answers a questionable or a seemingly hard to understand facet of the first eyewitness account. This is what I call unintentional eyewitness support. You see this if you ever read a series of supplemental reports from eyewitnesses. You will often see that one eyewitness will say something that kind of raises a question, only to be answered if you keep reading through the reports and you listen to what everyone has to say. Well, something similar, this is, by the way, a key feature of reliable eyewitness testimony, even though it may raise a question, this kind of eyewitness support you get unintentionally from other eyewitnesses does buttress the reliability of the account. Well, this kind of happens in Scripture too, right? So if you turn to the pages of Scripture, you will see that you'll sometimes see an account that seems to raise a question. By the way, I have been reading through the Gospels again, and I see more and more of these. Someday, I think I'll just do a book that just outlines all of them, because I don't think there's one source right now that covers all of this. But I do mention this quite a bit in a whole section of Cold Case Christianity. So you'll see that one eyewitness will say, Jesus is standing at the council being under trial. And at one point, they spit in his face and they beat him with their fists and they slap him. And someone who's doing this to Jesus says, kind of mocking him, oh, you say you're the Christ? Prophesy to us, you Christ. Who was the one who hit you? Well, that seems to me to raise a kind of curious question. Okay, you're standing right in front of me and you're slapping me in the face. You're beating me with your fists, and then you want me to identify who's doing this? Okay, what would be so hard about just saying, "Okay, it's you, you moron. You're standing right in front of me." How would that be considered prophecy if I could simply identify the person who's standing right in front of me? Well, it turns out there's another eyewitness account of this. This is the first one I gave you, is from Matthew. But in Luke, it's revealed that the people who were holding Jesus in custody and were mocking him had already blindfolded him. So this makes sense now, although it makes no sense in Matthew, because nowhere in Matthew does it say he was blindfolded. Well, Luke gives us the piece that makes sense of the account in Matthew. In other words, in a similar way to the first, we are able to insert this and make sense of the account. One account unintentionally supports another. I'll give you another example of this from Matthew. It says that when Jesus came into Peter's home, he saw that Peter's mother-in-law, was lying sick in bed with a fever. And it's interesting that everyone sees that what's going to happen. They all know Jesus is a miracle worker. He can heal. But it's interesting that not until evening comes does everyone bring demon-possessed and people who are broken and need healing. Suddenly he's barraged with people, and he's able to heal them. I mean, doesn't that strike you as odd that he wouldn't just heal Peter's mom, then go on and heal everybody? Like what is going on? Why is there a delay? That's the question that seems to be raised. Okay, why is it that just whatever time he got to maybe he gets to Peter's house late? I don't know, but the question still remains: why is it that Jesus waits until evening to heal everyone else? Well, Mark tells us, because in Mark's account, he says that when they came into that city, Peter's hometown, they entered on the Sabbath and began to teach. That means that they're not going to heal anymore and people aren't going to think they could be healed because it's the Sabbath. They start coming to him at the end of the Sabbath. So in other words, Mark inserts an account that makes sense of the missing detail. Let me give you just one more. It says in Matthew's gospel also that at the time that Herod, the tetrarch, heard the news about Jesus, he starts to question his servants. He says to the servants, "This is John the Baptist. He's risen from the dead." And that's why this miraculous power is at work in him. Okay, well, why would you remember that when the king has questions, he usually calls his advisors? Yet he's having this conversation, not with his advisors. He's having this conversation with his servants. A king asking these important questions about Jesus and John to not his advisors who would know something about the Messiah and about John, but instead to his servants. Doesn't that seem odd to you? It seems to raise a question for me. Why would Herod be talking to his servants about such things? Well, we know this answer is provided by Luke. Luke tells us that it was the servants, Joanna, the wife of Chuza, Herod's steward, and Susanna, and many others who were contributing. Guess what? These were followers of Jesus. They were actually contributing to the ministry of Jesus. And Herod must have known enough about that to be able to say, "Look, you know this guy." Now, we wouldn't know that from Matthew's account, but Luke, again, provides us that unintentional eyewitness support. So even internally, this kind of thing helps us to have confidence that you have puzzling eyewitness accounts, which is always the nature of eyewitness accounts. We puzzle them together, filling in the blanks for each other, providing the details that solve the mysteries of one or another account. There's another piece of internal evidence I want to show you also that corroborates a lot of the authenticity and reliability of the New Testament accounts. And you will see that, for example, in the kind of regional depictions and names that are, this is the region around which Jesus had his ministry. And I've actually dipped into Egypt here for a reason, because if you compare this region that is biblical up here on the top right with the region of Egypt, here's what you would discover. If you knew anything about the language and the names and the kinds of cities that exist in these two regions, you would know this. If we've done some work on this, I talk about it in Cold Case Christianity. There's a work that's been done on just examining what are the most popular men's and women's names in each region when it comes to Jewish people who are living in Egypt or Jewish people who are living around Jerusalem. It turns out that the most popular names in Egypt for Jewish men are these names. Now, you may recognize one or two of these, but that's about it, because these are not the most popular names in the first century for Jewish men in the area around Jerusalem. These are the most popular names. Well, now that makes sense, right? It turns out that the most popular names that are used in the first century around Jerusalem happen to appear on the pages of the New Testament. And interestingly, if you were writing this account from Egypt, you wouldn't know. So the Gnostic Gospels written from Egypt, they wouldn't have known what the most popular names were, right? In other words, it turns out that one of them, and I'll give you another example of this. So it just turns out that the documents written in the region of Jerusalem happen to get the names correctly. Not only that, to compare, for example, in Egypt, these Gnostic Gospels. If you read those Gnostic Gospels, this is what you're going to discover. You're going to discover that the major cities are described for sure. So you'll see the city of Jerusalem is often the main city ever described by any gospel author of the Gnostic Gospels. Interestingly, though, all of the minor cities appear in the New Testament. And why is that the case? Well, because let's face it, all of the minor cities were known to the authors who actually were writing from the region in which these events occurred. The people who were writing in Egypt and making up stories about Jesus just didn't know enough. They may have known a few names of his disciples. They may have known a few of the cities, but they weren't familiar with all of the details of the region around Jerusalem to be able to repeat it with the kind of clarity and the kind of accuracy that the gospel authors were, because the gospel authors actually knew the region because they're writing early in history from the region. But let me go to another type of evidence that is often used. And I want to look at evidence that's not in the scriptures and not from archaeology. This would also be considered an external evidence, right? And that is when you have another eyewitness who can say something, or another person who can say something, maybe even a generation later, that at least confirms that you've been telling that story consistently without changing it. And so, for example, we have a number of non-Christian ancient voices that appear in history. Now, I've done some work on this in both two books, a little bit here in Cold Case Christianity and a bunch in Person of Interest. But I want to show you that you can actually reconstruct the story of Jesus if you just had pagan sources. And I want to stay with the pagan sources that appear closest to the first century. Remember, we like that first century range because you've got a better chance that someone is still alive who would know the truth, even if they were a young child when Jesus lived and saw Jesus's ministry as a child, let's say. They would still be alive to know if these kinds of sources were saying something accurate. So I want to look at non-Christian sources early in history, like Thallus, for example, who is quoted by Julius Africanus, who Thallus is going to make a claim here that during the crucifixion, that there was an earthquake and there was darkness, just as the scriptures report. But Thallus is going to argue, according to Julius Africanus, that this is not because of anything divine. This is not God's response to the crucifixion. This was simply an eclipse.
Hi, I'm JT, and I made Result Hunter, the search engine for conservatives. Let me just tell you what it does. First of all,
Now, that's what he's going to argue. Thallus, now non-Christian, is going to say that, yep, that was not divine. That was just an eclipse. Well, in order to say it was just an eclipse, you have to admit certain things. Let me give it to you this way. If somebody ran into a bank and did a bank robbery, and then later I interviewed that person who did the robbery, and I said, dude, I know you were in that bank. Oh, I was not in that bank. Okay, I've got video of you in the bank. Now, I'm actually not telling the truth about that. I don't have any video, but I'm just going to tell him I do and see what he says. Well, okay, I was in the bank, but I was in the bank just to make a deposit. Really? Well, I can see you went over to the teller and lost your temper at the teller window. Oh, I was just angry because she wanted my identification. That's why I ran out to go get my ID. Now, look, he has not confessed to doing the robbery, but he has made certain admissible admissions, right? These are called reluctant admissions. He's told me he's in the bank at the time of the robbery. He's told me he confronted the teller for some reason. He's just changing why he did it. But those reluctant admissions will be used in court because those are the kinds of things that at least place him in the bank at the time of the robbery, doing everything that other witnesses are going to say was part of the bank robbery. Well, it turns out Thallus here has made several reluctant admissions. In order to claim that the darkness at the crucifixion was just an eclipse of the sun, you'd have to be able to first admit reluctantly that Jesus was an historical character who really lived and was crucified, and there was an earthquake and darkness at the crucifixion, even though you claim it's from some other source, it's from the eclipse. You've reluctantly given us these pieces of information, and you're starting to corroborate the story of the Gospels. Tacitus, for example, will say that in order to get rid of the report, Nero fastened the guilt. This is the report of a fire that was caused by, during Nero's reign in Rome. Nero afterwards blamed that fire on Christians. It says he inflicted the most exquisite tortures on a class hated for their abominations, called Christians by the populace. Christus, from whom the name had its origin, suffered the extreme penalty during the reign of Tiberius at the hands of one of our procurators, Pontius Pilatus. And a most mischievous superstition, thus checked for the moment, again broke out, not only in Judea, the first source of the evil, but even in Rome, where all things hideous and shameful from every part of the world find their center and become popular. So look, this is somebody who's not an eyewitness to the claims of the Gospels, but he does tell us that there was a person named Jesus, reluctantly he admits, who was called the Christ and who lived in Judea and was crucified under Pontius Pilate. And apparently the followers of this man, Jesus, were Christ, Christus in this case, were persecuted. Mar Bar Serapion, who's a Syrian philosopher, also reluctantly admits, and I'm trying to stay as close as I can in time. I'm not giving you 3rd and 4th century non-Christian sources here. I'm giving you the earliest sources that are writing in a period of time in which there would likely be survivors who would know if this was true. Mar Bar Serapion is saying something to his son. He's teaching his son about important philosophers of the past. He mentions, for example, what did the benefit did the Athenians obtain by putting Socrates to death, right? Famine and plague came over them as a judgment for their crime, or the people of Samos for burning Pythagoras. In one moment, their country was covered with sand, or the Jews. Oh, interestingly, for what? For murdering their wise king. After that, their kingdom, remember in 70 AD, the Jerusalem is attacked and the temple is destroyed. God rightly avenged these men, the wise king living on in the teachings that he actually provided. So here you have someone calling Jesus a wise king, and that claiming that the Jews somehow, at least tangentially, were involved or responsible for his death. Phlegon, who's quoted by Origen, makes a couple of claims here. Based on the 13th or 14th book, Origen is saying, not only ascribe to Jesus a knowledge of future events, but also testify that the result of these predictions came true. They actually corresponded to what was being predicted. And that while he was alive, he wasn't able to save himself, but arose after death. In other words, and he's been pierced by nails, showing these signs. Now think about that. That means that this is a source that confirms reluctantly a few other details. Now, just take a look for a second at this list in red here. This is everything that could be known about Jesus if you just surveyed the earliest non-Christian sources who recite what they know about Christianity. So you would know something about Jesus even if you lost every bit of the New Testament just from non-Christian voices in the first century. I just want you to see what that list looks like. These are the reluctant admissions of non-Christians. So there are ways to confirm and to corroborate. Now, remember, we're talking about touch point corroboration. I've learned one thing for sure. I don't expect to be able to corroborate every detail. That'd be simply foolishness. You just can't do this. I have open questions on every single cold case I work in front of a jury. And in a similar way, there are certainly questions that still could be answered even here. But this kind of what I call touch point corroboration, being able to pick up certain points of what the witness says happened and be able to corroborate them as we go. That is helpful, right? And you will find none of it is you can't corroborate any aspect, for example, of the Book of Mormon. That's why it's important for us to see the difference, right? I don't expect to be able to corroborate everything, but I should be able to corroborate something. And that's what we can do when it comes to the New Testament claims. So next time we meet, we'll be talking about the third way we corroborate eyewitnesses, and we'll do that next time.
Attention fitness.
Isn't that fascinating? I mean, that's just basically what he's showing you is that the evidence that the Bible provides is corroborated by non-Christian, what can be called pagan or profane witnesses writing about events that directly corroborate what's written in the Bible. And so we have both archaeology proving it, and we have written accounts proving it, and we have written accounts about completely unrelated actions and events that are corroborating what's in the Bible. So if you have any doubt at all that the Bible is true, these kinds of this kind of information should dispel that. No, I'm not doing song requests today. Come back on Sunday at 3 p.m. UTC on Rumble. That's when I do 3 hours of song requests live. Okay? It's just fascinating to me. I don't need proof that the Bible is true. I'm well past that point. But I've been fascinated to learn in recent years and months about all of the evidence that's accumulated over the centuries to show that the Bible is true, historically accurate, and that the events that it talks about actually happened. And that includes the life and death and resurrection of Jesus Christ. And so, if you're an honest person, if you're the kind of person that's willing to consider an idea that you hadn't considered before, or you're willing to look look at evidence with an open mind, then I don't see how you can come to any other conclusion than that the Bible tells the truth. It's just that simple. I wanted to share that with you because when I watched it earlier this week, I was just so impressed by his approach about how he looks at the Bible through the lens of a cold case detective who's putting together, bits and pieces of a puzzle to create a picture that makes sense. And as he said, you don't expect every single detail to be corroborated. That would be ridiculous, because you're not going to get, even in a case that's only 6 months old, you're not going to have every single detail of the case corroborated. But you have enough corroboration to be able to say that the story appears to be true, and therefore the book itself appears to be true. So that's what I wanted to share with you today. I just felt like there's a need for proof of God and proof of the Bible outside of the Bible, and lo and behold, the proof exists. And so once you get past that point where you're willing to admit, okay, there appears to be some truth in the Bible, then we can look at the Bible itself and say, well, what is the meaning of those truths? And what's the meaning to me in my personal life, and how does it affect me? What should I be doing in response to it? That sort of thing. Thank you, Martin, all the way from Scotland. Thank you very much. I tell you, it amazes me how people from all over the world are watching me. It just does. It's hard for me to explain to myself. Maybe you understand it, but it's amazing to me, that's for sure. So yeah, that was pretty quick. I have another one. I actually had one that was longer that I was going to show you. And then when I came across this, I said, no, I don't want to do that. I want to do this one instead. This other one is fascinating, and maybe I'll do it next week. It's there's a group of people in the Bible named the Kenites, Kenites, and they don't appear a lot of times, but they appear. sporadically throughout the Old Testament. And I don't want to spoil the surprise if we do that next week, but I actually thought, well, I'll just share this myself, but then I thought, no, I can't do as good a job as he does, so I'm going to let him do it. But the Kenites were children of Abraham. And Moses, when he escaped from Egypt, actually went to live with the Kenites and married a Kenite woman. And it turns out that the Kenites, although the Israelites who had gone to Egypt, they were there 400 years, and they were completely corrupted by the Egyptian gods to the point where they didn't believe in Yahweh anymore. But the Kenites were nomads who lived in the desert, and they had maintained the traditions of Abraham and of the belief in Yahweh. And so there are actually there's two, I think they're temples, I'm not sure now off the top of my head, but there's two places in Sudan, in the middle of the desert, where there is a building erected by the Egyptians, and on the building is an inscription that says, the Susha of Yahweh, and Susha means is the Egyptian term for nomads or Bedouins. And so there's no exact, correspondence to the Kenites, but it makes sense that that's talking about the Kenites, because who else would have believed in Yahweh? I just think it's amazing how much proof we now have that the Bible is true, and an overwhelming amount of truth. And yet there's people who will say there's no proof at all. There's no evidence that Jesus Christ ever existed. Well, you just saw it from pagan sources. So, if you're denying that, it's because you don't want to know. You don't want to admit the truth. You don't want to submit yourself to God. You want to continue to live your life on your own terms, which you have every right to do. Every one of us does. But the consequences of that in the long term are not good. I in some of my recent study that I've done, I've begun to realize what hell is. I always thought of hell as a place where there was eternal fire. But what hell really is the absence of God. And if you think about it, when the Bible talks about what people call the gathering together, excuse me. Ooh. Excuse me. When people talk about what they call the gathering together, which is when the saints are raised from the dead and those of us who are still alive are carried up to heaven, there will be an absence of God on earth, and you will get a taste of what hell is like, because God is light and love and goodness and mercy and joy. And if you take all that out of the world, try to imagine for a minute how dark it would be. It's basically every man for himself, and let the strong survive. Hello from France. Wow. Thank you very much. Thank you so much. I swear, I can, I read these comments and I'm just amazed. I'm stunned by it, because, excuse me, I think of myself as a very simple person. I'm not, there's nothing special about me, and yet, for many of you, I am, and that just amazes me. It really does. I can't thank you enough for those wonderful comments. Does anyone have any questions they want to ask, or any subjects particularly that they want to discuss? Anything you'd like me to pray for? Well, I don't see any comments coming in, so I guess everybody's happy, which is good. That's a good thing. I was going through my prayer list today, and whenever somebody on my channel says something like, "I'm struggling with X," or "My daughter has cancer," or whatever it might be, I put them on my prayer list, and I write down the specific things that they said, and that's what I pray for. And today, what's my name? Okay. My name is Paul Schmale, and I'm not involved in any denominations. I do. There's several preachers that I follow online. One of them is Philip Anthony Mitchell out of Atlanta. He spent the better part of 2 years teaching the book of Matthew, and I'm going through that now, and it's fascinating, absolutely fascinating. I've always been the kind of person that just reads the Bible and doesn't ask a lot of questions, and so this is all very new to me. The idea of saying, well, why does it say that, or what's missing here, or what am I not noticing? And so having that new aspect of research in the Bible being open to me, it's really been fascinating. I have a subscription on Grok, the AI that Elon Musk has. And so, for example, this morning I was reading in Isaiah chapters 28 through 32. And at the end of it, I thought, well, what is this really about? And so I just asked Grok, what's this really about? And then he will share with me what biblical scholars think it's about, what the Jews think it's about. It really gives me a very broad view of what's being said about those verses and what people are thinking about them. And then that gets me to thinking, and I started asking him questions. Well, what about this? Well, what about that? And of course, I say him, but it's an it. It's a computer. But let's see. I looked into one of the gentlemen who suggested in a previous video. Enjoyed his content. I love Bishop Mari Emmanuel personally. I don't know who that is. I'm gonna have to look that up. You're right that today's world is full of negativity and falseness. Yeah. Simple, positive, and honest man is a lot. Yeah. Okay. Well, you're right. I mean, this is something I was thinking about recently too, is with all the negativity that's going on in the world, that's basically the way the world will be, like that, completely, after Christians leave. And try to imagine trying to live in a world like that. That would be, oof, yay. I'm going to have to look up the Bishop Mari and see if I can listen to him. There's a couple of guys in Nigeria that I've listened to, but I really have trouble following them because of their accent. And so I don't watch them as much as I do. Excuse me. Okay. Kazu Bolt says, I love you, how's your health? other than the lungs, I'm fine. And I recently found out that I don't have what the doctors have thought I had. And the really frustrating thing for me is I went to a pulmonologist about probably 5 or 6 years ago, and he told me that I either had IPF, which is idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis, or I had chronic hypersensitivity pneumonitis, which we'll call them IPF and CHP, okay? And what he told me was, I want to do exploratory surgery because these diseases are treated differently. And so, and if I treat you for IPF and you have CHP, that could be deleterious to your health. So now here I find out I actually don't have IPF, I have CHP, and I'm being treated for IPF for the last 3 years. So I think that may be, excuse me, that may be part of the reason why I have this cough now, is because I've been treated incorrectly. So I'm really looking forward to the appointment I have next Tuesday to talk to the doctor and see what do I need to change in my meds to help improve my situation. But it's not like something, it's not life-threatening or anything like that. It's just, it's a minor irritation, basically. It's more of an ego thing than anything else. I just don't like coughing on camera. It irritates me that I'm doing that because I know that it's disruptive. And I know you all say, don't worry about it, it doesn't bother us, but still, it bothers me. And so I'd like to get rid of it. Oh, Kaz Bolt, you, I don't know why you retracted your message, but yeah, my health is fine. I have an echocardiogram coming up soon, and I'm sure that that will be fine because they always have been. It's funny, I was talking about this yesterday with my wife. I have 2 brothers, and one brother died of a heart attack. It took him 6 months, but he died. And the other brother had a heart attack, and now he's in pretty bad shape, and he's like, 7 years younger than me, and he's not nearly in as good a shape as I am. So, it's just weird because every time they've checked my heart, I'm fine. I don't have any problems at all. The last CT scan I had said I had moderate, what do they call it, plaque in the veins. So nothing to worry about. And, you know, I've said this many times. I plan on living to be 120, so I got a ways to go. I just would like to get rid of this dang cough. That would make me happy. And I do appreciate your prayers for me. I really do. I know God answers prayer, and I know that He will answer my prayers and your prayers for my health, and the ones that I pray for you. And as I was saying earlier, I went through my prayer list today and was just thinking about each of the lines that I'd written in there and the people, and praying to God that, because I know that God will heal somebody even if they're not believing, if I'm believing for them. And so that's one of the things, one of my goals for my channel is that when I pray for people, they'll be healed. And if that can happen, that will be a blessing to those people, and that would bless me more than anything. Well, I'm glad you're seeing me live now. This is Behunichi, I guess it pronounced it. You guys, some of you guys have the craziest handles. It's really amazing. And on Sundays when I do my live stream, I have one guy who has as his handle Paul Schmale Fanpalooza, and another one has something similar to that. It's really funny. Thank you. I appreciate it. That's Muller. Is that Nuller or Muller? Nuller. Okay. I have to use my magnifying glass on this chat because it's so small. I can't see that stuff anymore. Glad to see you. Thank you. You know, it's just, it's an everyday walk is what it is. Every day is a new day. And I get up in the morning and I have to eat breakfast first because I take vitamins in the morning. And if I don't eat, I'll get sick to my stomach. And so I eat and then I take my vitamins and then I get into the Word and I start studying and reading and learning. And I've been doing that for decades now. And it just, you know, there's things that I've talked about on my channel about how, for example, in 2011, excuse me, my wife was diagnosed with uterine cancer. And then she had surgery scheduled, but before they could do the surgery, she slipped and fell and broke a couple toes. And so the doctor told her, I can't do surgery unless you're ambulatory. So she had to put off the surgery until the spring of 2012. Was 2000, I can't remember now, 2011, I think it was 2011 when she was diagnosed with uterine cancer. So then she said, well, I've been putting off my mammogram, I'll go do that now. And they found breast cancer. Well, I didn't think about it at the time, but thinking back on it, our reaction to that was, some people would say it was weird. We weren't shaken up at all. We weren't concerned at all because we knew God heals. And so in 2012, excuse me, in 2012 she had surgery, and they did, of course, that when they do surgery for cancer, they always do pathology to see how much cancer there is. They found 0 cancerous cells in her uterus and 0 cancerous cells in her breast. But the funny thing is, that didn't really affect us in a way like we're going, yay, you know, fantastic. We're just going, yeah, of course, that's how it should be. That's the expectation, you know. It's can you shout out my name? It's okay. Adharaj, is that how you pronounce it? Adharaj. I'm glad you came to my live stream. I appreciate it. It just, you know, it's an expectation that we have that we'll be healed. And sometimes it doesn't happen immediately. So it's not like, well, you know, my cough's not getting better, so God's not going to heal me. That's a crazy thought. No, God will heal me. I just don't know when. Until then, I put up with it because it's a minor inconvenience, really. It's not something that is going to be, it's not going to put me in bed or anything like that or make me unable to function. I mean, I'm here talking to you, so it's a way of living. It's a lifestyle that's maybe foreign to a lot of people, but it's possible for anyone to live that way if they walk with God. It just is. And you just have, you know, if you're walking with God every day, you have absolutely nothing to worry about. Even if the most unbelievable thing happens, it's like, big deal. God's still in power. God's still on his throne. He'll still take care of me. I'm not worried about it. What's he say? Christ heals our hearts and souls before the physical body. God bless you and your wife. Yes. Can you give some life advice to someone who is still a teenager? Well, the first thing I would say to you is, if you haven't already, my wife isn't just nice, she's tough as nails. She's been through a lot. She had another incident in 2019 where she was in the hospital for 90 days, and the doctor said she had a 2% chance of survival. She's still with me. The doctors were wrong. The first thing I would say is, if you're not born again, get born again, and then start reading the Bible and becoming familiar with God, and talk to God every day. Just, a lot of us are uncomfortable doing that when other people are around. So find a private place where you can be alone with no chance of being interrupted, and just pour out your heart to God. Tell him what your goals are, what your desires are, and ask him for his help, and ask him for what his goals are for your life. Because each one of us has a calling from God. And when I say that, I used to think that meant I had to be a preacher. But I've learned over the years, that's not what it means at all. God has placed God has designed a role for you that is perfect for you. So, for example, the guy that we watched earlier, he was a detective, but he was doing what God wanted him to do. And now he's applying his detecting skills to showing that the Bible is true. Okay? And I'm sure that, and you can call that a ministry, I suppose. Excuse me. But it's what God wants him to do. God might want you to be a truck driver, or a carpenter, or an engineer, or a doctor. It's whatever. You in your heart have a calling that you know is yours, that when you fulfill it, your life will be fulfilled. And so you just pray that God will open your eyes to show you what that is, and show you how to get there. And God will make a way where there is no way. Any advice on dealing with lust? I feel like it's the biggest obstacle that stands in the way of my relationship with Jesus. Well, man makes plans and God laughs. Yeah, that's right. Or he cries. Sometimes he cries because you're not fulfilling your destiny at all. Okay. This may seem extreme to you, but when you're dealing with lust, what you need to do is you need to separate yourself from whatever it is that leads you toward lust. Okay? I'll give you a good example. I get junk mail, tremendous amounts of junk mail, because I don't hide my email address, and I don't try to do anything to keep people from sending me junk mail. And a lot of the junk mail I get is of sexual nature, kind of stuff I don't even want to talk about here. But I used to go through my junk mail folder to make sure there wasn't anything in there that I was missing. But I was looking at each email, and I said to myself, why are you doing this? This is not helpful. And so I quit that. And what I do now is I just scroll through the list and look at the subjects. And if it's something, for example, sometimes when somebody sends me an email asking for a free copy of my book, it'll end up in my junk mail folder. So I don't want to miss those. And so I go through and look at the subject line, and then I just move any out that should be in my inbox, and then just delete the rest instead of sitting there reading each one. Okay? So one of the first things I do is pray about it and just ask God for help. because God will help you overcome that. And then the second thing is, look for the things that lead you into that temptation and start eliminating those from your life. You know, if you watch a certain type of movie, stop watching them for a while. If you're reading certain types of books or magazines, stop reading them for a while until you've overcome it. But the biggest thing is to just ask God for help, because God will help you. What if someone is another religion or doesn't believe in God? Well, okay. See, this is an issue, because we human beings, we talk about any kind of belief in a supreme being as being a religion. Belief in God is not a religion. Religion is man-made. Lutherans, Protestants, Buddhists, Muslims, Jews, all of these are religions, and they have, they have strict rules and guidelines about how you're supposed to behave, and so forth and so on. And even if they're taken from the Bible, they're expanded in a sense knowledge way. They're expanded by men who think they know better than God how you should behave. And so what you want to do is you want to avoid religion and just build a relationship with God Almighty. Okay? Now, because I know the Bible is true, and it's been proven true, as we showed today, even the pagan sources show that it's true. That's what I would go to read instead of other religions. But I wouldn't, for example, I wouldn't be studying the creeds and doctrines of churches, because those are man-made. They're not built. They don't come from the Bible. They're extra biblical, and so in the final analysis, they're dross. They're meaningless. Excuse me. They may help people. They may help people feel like they're close to God, but they won't actually get people close to God. The only thing that gets you close to God is a personal relationship with God. And God has that with every human being on earth if they want it. What do I think of Catholicism? Well, that's an interesting question that you asked. My father was born and raised Catholic. And he went to Catholic University, got his bachelor's degree, his master's, and he was working on his PhD. And he met my mother. They dated for 7 years. My mother was a strong Lutheran. And she basically told him, if you want to marry me, you're going to have to change your faith to Lutheran. So he did. And then his own mother turned him into the Catholic Church. They excommunicated him and destroyed his college records so that he could not get his PhD. And every year that my father was alive, he would petition the Pope for permission to take his oral exams so he could get his PhD, and he never got permission. That's not godly. I'm not saying that there aren't godly Catholics. There are. But the Catholic Church is just like every other church. Excuse me. They've built up a system of rules and guidelines and stuff like that that have nothing to do with the Bible. They may have the appearance of having to do with the Bible, but they don't. And the Catholic Church, basically calls its roots back to Peter. But my research on Jesus Christ has shown me that what happened in the 2nd and 3rd century AD was the leaders of the church got seduced by Greek philosophy and began to believe and say things about Jesus Christ and about God that were not true. What about what Jesus said to Simon? Yeah. He said, "You are the rock, and on this rock will I build my church." And that's what he meant. But he meant his church, not the Catholic Church, not the Lutheran Church, not the Presbyterian Church, not the Methodist Church, the Church of God. Tradition is important. Not to God it isn't. I hate to tell you that, but not to God. Tradition is irrelevant. The only thing that matters is the Word. God tells us that we should search the Word every day to see whether those things are true. See, once you make the statement that Scripture is not enough, you have departed from the truth. It's just that simple. You've departed from the truth, and you've started adding in man's opinions. And man's opinions are worthless. They're worthless. The only opinion that matters is God's. And the only place you find God's opinion is in the Bible, not in tradition, not in anything that I would write, anything that any other person would write. You know, you can learn from people who write things, but you need to go read the Bible for yourself and confirm for yourself that what the person told you is true is actually biblically true. Because many people have said many things about the Bible that were not true. Well, okay, if you look at church history, you'll find that they didn't really even have popes until about the 4th century. Before that, excuse me. Before that, the Bishop of Rome was just one of many. Okay, so the tradition of the Catholic Church as we know it today was something that developed out of that milieu, if you will, but it morphed into something more than what it should have been. And that's not a criticism of Catholicism. That's a criticism of every religion on the face of the earth, because they're all distortions of the truth. Where did he say that? Very much inspire you to look at the early church. I have. Okay. See, this is Bio 3556. Okay. I've been reading the early church fathers recently, and I've studied a lot about that. And I can tell you that what I see when I read the early church fathers is I see a very subtle departure from the truth over time, until we got to the 4th century when it just got completely out of whack. And if you just think, excuse me, goodness, if you just think about it for a minute, when in our history can you think of a time that was anything like what was going on in Acts? And why do we not have the same church that they had in Acts, where they spoke in tongues? 3,000 people were born again in one day. They healed people. They raised people from the dead. You see that sporadically here and there in the world today, but you don't see it, globally across the whole church constantly. And the reason you don't see that is because we were led astray. we were led to believe that we could improve the scriptures by introducing philosophy, particularly Platonic philosophy, into the church. And that would help to, what I see when I read the early church fathers is I see them making a real honest effort to try and okay, if every man's opinion is worthless, then why is it? Well, you're not supposed to interpret Scripture. You're supposed to understand it. There's a difference. Okay? So you're more emphasizing on the spiritualistic nature of belief. Well, no, it's very practical. I wouldn't say it's spiritualistic in the sense that that's all it is. Yes, there's a spiritual aspect to it, but it's very practical as well. Martin, I'm not trying to change your opinion. I really am not. And I think, like I said, I think there's very good Christians inside the Catholic Church as well. There's nothing wrong with going to church at a Catholic church. But it's up to us as individual Christians to know and understand God as best we can by studying His Word. That's what He tells us to do. To look back then and now. Okay. I'm not a denominational Christian, period. I don't go to church. I watch sermons online. I study the Bible, but I do not attend a church, and I used to be, when I was a child, I was a Lutheran. Hold on a minute, I got to read this. I'm confused about religion. I don't hate it. I respect all religions. Sometimes I've done stuff that was... okay. Well, look. Excuse me. If you're familiar with the Apostle Paul, then you know that he was murdering Christians. And he was born again. So your past, in God's eyes, is irrelevant. Once you follow the instructions in Romans 10:9 and 10, to believe with your heart the Lord Jesus and confess with your mouth that He is your Lord. I'm not quoting. Let's see. Confess with your mouth the Lord Jesus and believe in your heart that God raised Him from the dead. Thou shalt be saved. That's simple. That's all it takes. And Ephesians tells us it's by grace and not of works, lest any man boast. So there isn't anything you can do to get saved except to confess Jesus as your Lord and believe in your heart that God raised Him from the dead. And once you do that, God wipes clean your slate. Not just what you did in the past, but everything you'll do in the future. God doesn't see it. He sees you as a perfect being in His eyes because you're His child now. Okay? I haven't studied Hinduism, so I don't really know much about it. Do you like the... you talking about the shake? Yeah. I thought that was cool. Attending church is one of the things we are all commanded to do. Yes, but what is church? In the first century, it was people meeting in their homes. Excuse me. Over time, it got formalized into something that it was really never intended to be. And so My encouragement to you would be, regardless of what, if you are in a denomination, regardless of what denomination you're involved in, get into the Word, study it, learn it for yourself. Don't just, how do I want to put this? Don't go to church on Sunday and then spend the rest of the week sinning. Okay? Spend the rest of the week studying, learning, praying, spending time with God. Okay? Yes, it says not to neglect gathering together. Yeah, you're absolutely right. But what is gathering together? Does that mean I have to go to a physical building? Or does it mean I'm supposed to be spending time with like-minded believers? You see? On the problem of evil, common problem for the thesis. I am one too. Okay. So what's your question about evil? There's been some really intelligent people who have tried to tackle the question of evil. John Lennox is one who you can look up online and see his discussions about it. But for me, it's very simple. Evil is the devil, and you have to understand. There's two worlds. We live in two worlds that are I don't know how to describe them. They're not parallel. They're intertwined. Okay, the spiritual world and the physical world exist in the same place, if you will. It's hard to describe, but that's the best I can do. And the spiritual world has tremendous control and influence over the physical world. Okay? So God created Adam and Eve as perfect human beings. They had body, they had soul, they had spirit, and they had freedom of will. They could do whatever they wanted. They could choose to obey God, or they could choose to disobey God. And they chose to disobey. When that happened, God took their spirit away. So now man was instead of being a tripart being, man was a two-part being, body and soul only. And we ended up with the only thing that we had to detect what's going on around us is the five senses. Okay? And the five senses cannot detect the spiritual world. And so we were walking around in a world where we were surrounded by spiritual beings and completely oblivious to it. The Bible says a natural man doesn't understand the things of the Spirit. They're foolishness to him. And so that's the state of, that's what's called the state of sin. That's what we live in as natural men. When you get born again, God puts his Spirit inside you. Now you are complete again. That's why so many people seek an answer outside themselves, is because they can sense that something's missing. There's a part missing. There's something that's not there that should be there. And the something that's not there that should be there is the Spirit. Okay? So God restores that relationship, and now you can not only talk to God, but you can be aware of what's going on around you spiritually. And so you can sense when there's an evil spirit in the area and influencing things. And you can command them to leave. Excuse me. Because God has delegated his authority to do that to you. Okay? Yeah, theology. It's hard to escape all these man-made terms when you're talking about God. It really is. So basically, if you wanted to boil the story of the Bible down to its essence, it was the loss of communion with God that was then restored when Jesus Christ died on the cross and was resurrected. And mankind's search for the missing element, which is the Spirit, okay? There's also Luke to consider as context for the topic. Go into the highways and compel them to come in, let my house... Yes. Have you ever watched a Raphael Warnock sermon? I have not. I didn't know those were online. Are hallucinations demons? Wow. Okay. They can be. They often are, especially if they're drug-induced. But my favorite books of the Bible are Paul's epistles. So I heard a preacher who I respect a great deal say that every dream comes from God. And I thought, well, that's an odd statement because I have dreams that I don't think have any message in them at all. I know that God can give us dreams and that he can inspire us or warn us or do other things like that. But I don't think every single dream that we ever have comes from God. I think our own minds have enough information in them that we can create a scenario in a dream that just is the result of something we were thinking about when we went to bed. So, and I looked for whenever somebody makes a statement like that, I look for evidence of that in the Bible. I couldn't find anything along those lines. He's like Martin Luther King Jr. Treat yourself to amazing love. Okay. There have been talks about oblivion in the Bible. You should listen to Use His Gospel by Kanye West. It goes well with what you're saying. Yeah. Okay. Yes, I love those. I love those passages in Corinthians about the nature of love. Golly days. This has been a wide-ranging conversation. Thoughts on the Anglican Church? I don't know much about the Anglican Church, but excuse me. If you want my thoughts on churches in general, they tend to be, to my way of thinking, rigid and uncompromising on their dogma and their teachings. And far too often they think they're the only ones that are right, which is silly because only God is right. No man is right. Yes. Thoughts on Shake? I liked it. I thought it was fun. No, not one this gospel you should listen to. Jesus Lord by Kanye. It's very relatable. Okay. Thoughts on Mormons. Well, there have been, I haven't studied any of these other religions very carefully at all. I really haven't. I've been a Christian all my life, so, excuse me, I didn't feel the need to really research other things. But I have seen more than one video where people have shown that the Book of Mormon has contradictions in it. I can't tell you what they are, but I've seen videos where they showed them. The video we watched today, the guy talked about how, the guy talked about how the Book of Mormon has no corroboration in outside of itself. So those to me are things that I would be very concerned about. What book would you recommend to someone interested in the Bible and Christianity that has never read anything even related to it? Romans. The Bible. That's the best thing you can read is the Bible. Now, there are people this is the thing about religion. People get so wrapped up in it that they just lose sight of God. For example, there are people who tell you that the only Bible that's the Bible is the King James Version. Every other Bible is trash. That's not true. That's not true. There's lots of really good Bibles. I tend to like the New King James Version simply because I was raised on the King James, and so I'm familiar with it. And so the verses don't sound quite so weird to me when I read them. But there's many other Bibles that are worth reading. The NIV is a good one. The NASB is another good one. The Common English Bible is another good one. What I would recommend is that you pick a version of the Bible that you're comfortable with and read it. But at the same time, look into the meaning of the words in the original language, because that's where you find the real meat of the story is in the original languages. That doesn't mean you have to learn Greek or you have to learn Hebrew. The Gospel of Mark would be a good place to start. I like a good King James Bible, study Bible, yeah. I like the New King James simply because it gets rid of the these and the thous, which are kind of archaic now. But it still follows along the same lines as the King James, and so the verses sound familiar to me. Because, I memorized a lot of verses in the King James, and so when I read them in other versions, I think, that's not that verse at all. But that's simply because of what I learned. Obviously, making sure the Bible you're reading is not omitting verses or altering them as some adulterations of the Bible do. Yes, there are some versions of the Bible that are not as good as others. There's a preacher on YouTube named Robbie Gallaty. And if you go look up his channel, he has a video where he talks about all the different versions and he rates them. Now, these are his ratings, okay? Excuse me. Someone else might rate them differently than he does, but at least he gives you reasons why he rates them that way. And so that tells you something about the fidelity of that Bible to the scriptures. Because there's also different schools of thought about how you should translate, because there's one school that says you should be as literal as you can possibly be. There's another school that says you should try to convey the sense of the verse. Well, those make me a little bit nervous because When I'm trying to convey the sense of something to you, I'm putting my own thoughts into it. You see what I'm saying? It's really hard to convey the sense of a book of the Bible in a way that doesn't add in your own understanding and interpretation of it. And we've had far too much of that in the world. The book of Enoch, it's interesting, but it's not scripture. And it's being blown up on the internet, on YouTube a lot, but it's just not. It has contradictions in it, has things that don't make any sense in it, and it's not, there's a lot of what they call deuterocanonical books that are books that did not make it into the final canon, that are they're not scripture, but they're scriptural, if that makes any sense. They're about Jesus, they're about the God, but they're not inspired by God. I'm not Christian, but what is something from the Bible that affected you the most in your life? Jesus Christ's crucifixion. If I give any thought to that at all, I start crying. That's impacted me more than anything. And the thought that when he was being beaten, that I was being healed, that is, for me, profound. That is incredibly profound. That he would be willing to place himself, because remember, Jesus Christ was the Son of God. All he had to do was say, God, get me out of here, and he'd have been out of there. Okay? He chose of his own free will to be beaten beyond recognition, because he knew that when he was being beaten, I was being healed. And then he chose to get up on the cross and die for me. Willingly. And he wasn't killed. He gave up his life. It just, I have a hard time talking about it without crying. I really do. I mean, that to me that's the most profound thing I can think of. Beyond anything else. It's just, and then that thing I shared a couple weeks ago about Psalm 22, that, oh my God, that just blew my mind. That Jesus Christ was hanging on the cross, having been beaten to within an inch of his life, having nails driven through his ankles and through his wrists, which had to be unbelievably painful. And then hanging up there, the whole purpose of a crucifixion was to compress your body so that it was hard for you to breathe. That's what it did. And he's hanging up there on the cross, suffering through all of that willingly. And one of the last things he says is, my God, why have you forsaken me? And I, for the longest time, thought that was such an incredibly bad thing to say. Why would you say God forsake you? God's your Father. He wouldn't forsake you. Why did you say that? And when I learned that was the opening verse of Psalm 22, and I realized that Jesus Christ was hanging on that cross, suffering horribly, and the last thought that goes through his mind before he gives up his life is, let me share the word with you. Oh my God. I can't. It's hard for me to comprehend. It's hard for me to comprehend how he could be thinking about the people that were watching him and how he wanted to share the word with them as he was giving up his life. Lord have mercy, I can't. Oh, it's just hard. It's really, really hard for me to give any thought to that at all without breaking down in tears because of what he did. It just is so profound. No human being on the earth would ever do that. And yet he did. And I will be forever grateful. Because if I'm anything, I'm a sinful person. I am a broken human being. I am imperfect in every way. And for him to say, I'm going to give my life for you so that you can be perfect. That's a sacrifice that is undeserved and yet accepted. And wow, you got me started now. It just see, the Jews who were standing there watching him die on the cross, when he said those words, would know exactly which psalm he was talking about, and they would recite that psalm in their head and realize it was talking about him. And it was like confirmation. He really is the Messiah. Excuse me. It was like confirmation for them. He really is the Messiah. Not that most of them that were watching didn't already believe that, but it was just like a stamp that said, this is it. This is the absolute proof that I am who I say I am. And I'm doing this for you. And then he said, it is finished. I told you I can't talk about this. I can't. It's beyond comprehension. It's beyond my ability to say thank you. It's just incredible. And I can't. Oh, God. Yeah. And when I think about the people in the world that don't believe in God and are not born again, and what it's going to be like for them after we go, it breaks my heart. Because it's literally going to be hell on earth. You know? Excuse me. The Bible says we are the salt of the earth, speaking about Christians. When we're gone, there's nothing left to preserve it. And it will descend into utter chaos and hatred and evil and destruction. And there will be people who have to live through that. Well, they won't live through the whole thing, but they'll live through parts of it. It'll be, I don't even want to imagine how difficult that will be. And I certainly don't want to be a part of it. No. Yeah. The thing is, yes, you're right, Martin. You're absolutely right. But they don't know what they want. They don't really understand. I mean, they know what they want, but they don't understand what that means. They don't understand the impact of that. They don't understand how they will be affected by it. And that's the saddest part, is that they just don't get it. They don't get it. Well, guys, we've run really long tonight. This has been a blessing, and I really remember the resurrection, follow the crucifixion. Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Well, I don't despair for me. I despair for the people that don't believe in God. They just don't know. They don't know, and they don't want to know. And it's sad. Anyway, we've gone long tonight, longer than I normally do, but that's okay. I don't mind. But I do need to go, so I want to pray for all of you. I pray that as each passing day goes by, that you, 2:40 a.m. Oh my God. Oh Lord. Thank you, Martin. That's unbelievable. Wow. I pray that every day that you live, you will get closer to God, that you will know him better, and that you will understand him better, and that he will bless you more and more, and that he will fill your life with joy and peace and health and prosperity and grace. Thank you for coming to my stream. I'll see you again next week.